Cider, SY-dər, is an alcoholic beverage made from the fermented juice of apples. Cider is popular in the United Kingdom, especially in the West Country, and widely available. The UK has the world's highest per capita consumption, as well as its largest cider-producing companies. Cider is also popular in many Commonwealth countries, such as Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. Aside from the UK and its former colonies, cider is popular in other European countries including Ireland, Portugal, mainly in Minho and Madeira, France, particularly Brittany and Normandy, northern Italy, Piedmont and Friuli, and Spain, especially Asturias and the Basque Country. Central Europe also has its own types of cider, with Rhineland-Palatinate and Hesse producing a particularly tart version known as Apfelwein. The juice of any variety of apple can be used to make cider, but cider apples are best. The addition of sugar or extra fruit before a second fermentation increases the ethanol content of the resulting beverage. Cider alcohol content varies from 1.2% to 8.5% ABV or more in traditional English ciders, and 3.5% to 12% in continental ciders. In UK law, it must contain at least 35% apple juice, fresher from concentrate. Although the Campaign for Real Ale, says that real cider must be at least 90% fresh apple juice. In the US, there is a 50% minimum. In France, cider must be made solely from apples. In 2014, a study found that a pint of mass-market cider contained 5 teaspoons, 20.5 grams, of sugar, nearly the amount the WHO recommends as an adult's daily allowance of added sugar, and 5 to 10 times the amount of sugar in lager or ale. Perry is a similar product to cider made from fermented pear juice. Appearance and types. The flavor of cider varies. Ciders can be classified from dry to sweet. Their appearance ranges from cloudy with sediment to completely clear, and their color ranges from almost colorless to amber to brown. The variations in clarity and color are mostly due to filtering between pressing and fermentation. Some apple varieties will produce a clear cider without any need for filtration. Both sparkling and still ciders are made. The sparkling variety is the more common. Modern, mass-produced ciders closely resemble sparkling wine in appearance. More traditional brands tend to be darker and cloudier. They are often stronger than the mass-produced varieties and taste more strongly of apples. Almost colorless. White cider has the same apple juice content as conventional cider but is harder to create because the cider maker has to blend various apples to create a clearer liquid. White ciders tend to be sweeter and more refreshing. They are typically 7 to 8% ABV in strength. Black cider, by contrast, is dry amber premium cider which has an alcohol content of 7 to 8% ABV. The descriptor black usually comes after the brand name such as Union Black and Barnstormer Black. Production, scratting and pressing. Apples grown for consumption are suitable for cider making, though some regional cider makers prefer to use a mix of eating and cider apples, as in Kent, England, or exclusively cider apples, as in the West Country, England. There are many hundreds of varieties of cultivars developed specifically for cider making. Once the apples are gathered from trees in orchards, they are scratted, ground down, into what is called pomace or pomage. Historically this was done using pressing stones with circular troughs, or by a cider mill. Cider mills were traditionally driven by the hand, water mill, or horsepower. In modern times, they are likely to be powered by electricity. The pulp is then transferred to the cider press and built up in layers known as cheeses into a block. Traditionally, the method for squeezing the juice from the apples involves placing sweet straw or hair cloths between the layers of pomace. This will alternate with slatted ash wood racks until there is a pile of 10 or 12 layers. The set is then subjected to increasing degrees of pressure until all the must, or juice, is squeezed from the pomace. This juice, after being strained in a coarse hair sieve, is then put into either open vats or closed casks. The pressed pulp is given to farm animals as winter feed. Composted, discarded, or used to make liqueurs. Fermentation. The steps before fermentation might include fruit or juice blending, titratable acidity and pH measurements and sometimes adjustments, and sulfur dioxide and yeast additions. Fermentation is carried out at a temperature of 4 to 16 degrees Celsius, 40 to 60 degrees Fahrenheit. This is low for most kinds of fermentation but is beneficial for cider as it leads to slower fermentation with less loss of delicate aromas. Fermentation can occur due to natural yeasts that are present in the must, as some cider makers add cultivated strains of cider yeast, such as Saccharomyces bianus. During the initial stages of fermentation, there is an evolution of carbon dioxide as the yeasts multiply and begin to break down the sugar into ethanol. In addition to fermentative metabolism of yeast, certain organoleptic compounds are formed that have an effect on the quality of cider, such as other alcohols, esters and other volatile compounds. After fermentation, racking occurs into a clean vessel, trying to leave behind as much yeast as possible. Shortly before the fermentation consumes all the sugar, the liquor is racked, siphoned, into new vats. This leaves dead yeast cells and other undesirable material at the bottom of the old vat. At this point, it becomes important to exclude airborne acetic bacteria, so vats are filled completely to exclude air. The fermenting of the remaining available sugar generates a small amount of carbon dioxide that forms a protective layer, reducing air contact. This final fermentation creates a small amount of carbonation. Extra sugar may be added specifically for this purpose. Racking is sometimes repeated if the liquor remains too cloudy. Apple-based juice may also be combined with fruit to make a fine cider. Fruit purees or flavorings can be used, such as grape, cherry, raspberry, and cranberry. The cider is ready to drink after a 3-month fermentation period, though more often it is matured in the vats for up to 3 years. Blending and bottling. For larger-scale cider production, ciders from vats produced from different varieties of apple may be blended to accord with market taste. If the cider is to be bottled, usually some extra sugar is added for sparkle. Higher quality ciders can be made using the champagne method, but this is expensive in time and money and requires special corks, bottles, and other equipment. Some home brewers use beer bottles, which work perfectly well, and are inexpensive. This allows the cider to become naturally carbonated. Festivals. The Western British tradition of wassailing the apple trees and making an offering of cider and bread in autumn to protect the fertility of the orchard appears to be a relatively ancient tradition, superficially dating back to the pre-Christian early medieval period. The autumn tradition of bobbing for apples is due to the abundance of fruit at this time. A modern cider festival is an organized event that promotes cider and, usually, perry. A variety of ciders and perries will be available for tasting and buying. Such festivals may be organized by pubs, cider producers, or cider-promoting private organizations. Uses and variations. Calvados and Applejack are distilled from cider. Calvados is made throughout Normandy, France, not just in the Calvados département. It is made from cider by double distillation. In the first pass, The result is a liquid containing 28 to 30% alcohol. After the second pass, the concentration of alcohol is about 40%. Applejack is a strong alcoholic beverage made in North America by concentrating cider, either by the traditional method of freeze distillation or by true evaporative distillation. In traditional freeze distillation, a barrel of cider is left outside during the winter. When the temperature is low enough, the water in the cider starts to freeze. If the ice is removed, the now more concentrated alcoholic solution is left behind in the barrel. If the process is repeated often enough, and the temperature is low enough, the alcohol concentration is raised to 20 to 30% alcohol by volume. Home production of Applejack is popular in Europe. A few producers in Quebec and England, inspired by ice wine, have developed ice cider, French, cider glace. For this product, the apples are frozen either before or after being harvested. Its alcohol concentration is 9 to 13% ABV. A popular aperitif in Normandy is pommeau, a drink produced by blending unfermented apple juice and apple brandy in the barrel. The high alcoholic content of the spirit prevents fermentation of the juice and the blend takes on the character of the aged barrel. Cocktails may include cider, besides kir and snakebite. An example is black velvet, in a version of which cider may replace champagne. Cider may also be used to make vinegar. Apple cider vinegar is noted for its high acidity and flavor. Related drinks. Other fruits can be used to make cider-like drinks. The most popular is made from fermented pear juice, known as perry. It is called poiré in France and produced mostly in Lower Normandy there. A branded sweet perry known as Babycham, marketed principally as a women's drink and sold in miniature champagne-style bottles, was once popular but has become unfashionable. Another related drink is cider fermented with honey. Although not widely made in modern times, various other pomme fruits can produce palatable drinks. Apicius, in Book 2 of De Recoquinaria, includes a recipe calling for quince cider. National varieties. Europe. Before the development of rapid long-distance transportation, regions of cider consumption generally coincided with those of cider production. As such, cider was said to be more common than wine in 12th century Galicia, and certainly the idea of it was present in England. The conquest of 1066. Using crab apples. The word wassail is derived from a Saxon phrase, was heil. It is what would have been said by Saxons as a toast at Yuletide. Southern Italy, by contrast, though indeed possessing apples, had no tradition for cider apples at all, and like its other neighbors on the Mediterranean Sea, preserved the Roman tradition of apples as an ingredient for desserts, as evidenced by the frescoes at Herculaneum and Pompeii, descriptions by classical writers and playwrights, and Apicius, whose famous cookbook does not contain a single recipe for fermenting apples but rather includes them as part of main courses, especially accompanying pork. Austria equals. In Austria, cider is made in the southwest of Lower Austria, the so-called Mostviertel, and in Upper Austria as well as in parts of Styria. Almost every farmer there has some apple or pear trees. Many farmers also have a kind of inn called a Mosthuriga, similar to a Heuriger for new wine, where they serve cider and traditional fare. Non-sparkling cider is typically called Most. Austria's most popular sparkling cider Goldkehlchen is produced in South Styria and marketed internationally since 2013 by the company founders Adam and Eva. Belgium equals. Cidre Rouwet SA, established in 1898, is the only independent craft cider producer in Belgium. In addition to their own brand Rouwet, The company produces high-end ciders for private labels. Heineken owns the other Belgian cider maker, Stassen SA, who in addition to their own local brands such as Strassen X Cider also produce Strongbow Jacques, a 5.5% ABV cider with cherry, raspberry, and blackcurrant flavors. Zonhoven-based Konings Envy specializes in private label ciders for European retailers and offers a wide variety of flavors and packaging options to the beverage industry. Stella Artois CIDRE is produced in Zonhoven and has been marketed since 2011. Denmark Despite a strong apple tradition, Denmark has little cider production. 6 places that produce cider in Denmark are Pomona, since 2003, Fao Cider, since 2003, Cider, since 2004, Orbach Bryggeri, since 2006, Cider Projectet, since 2008, and Svaneke Brygges, since 2009. All are inspired mainly by English and French cider styles. The assortment of imported ciders has grown significantly since 2000. Prior to that, only ciders from Sweden, primarily non-alcoholic, were generally available. The leading cider on the Danish market is made by Culte S. In 2008, Carlsberg launched an alcoholic cider in Denmark called Summersby Cider, which has an alcohol content of 4.7% and a sweet taste. Finland The best-known brands labeled as S-Cider are Golden Cap, Fizz, and Upsider. They typically contain 4.5 to 4.7% volume of alcohol. Virtually all finished cider is produced from fermented apple or pear juice concentrate mixed with water and is not cider as per the traditional description of the drink. It typically comes in a variety of flavors ranging from forest berry to rhubarb and vanilla. France France was one of the countries that inherited in knowledge of apple cultivation from both the Celtic Gauls and the later Romans, who ruled the country for approximately 500 years. Both had knowledge of grafting and keeping apples. The earliest mentions of cider in this country go back to the Greek geographer Strabo. He speaks of the profusion of apple trees in Gaul and describes a cider-like drink. In the 9th century, Charlemagne, in the Capitulas, ordered skilled brewers, the cicators, to always be present on his estates to make him ale, pomme, pomacium, perry and all the liquors liable to be used as drinks, and also ordered an expansion of planting apple trees in what is now northern France. French cider, French pronunciation, cid, is an alcoholic drink produced predominantly in Normandy and Brittany. It varies in strength from below 4% alcohol to considerably more. Cider is a sweet cider, usually up to 3% in strength. Demi-sec is 3 to 5% and Cider Brut is a strong dry cider of 4.5% alcohol and above. Most French ciders are sparkling. Higher quality cider is sold in champagne-style bottles. Cider Boucher. Many ciders are sold in corked bottles, but some screw-top bottles exist. In crêperies, crepe restaurants, in Brittany, cider is generally served in traditional ceramic bowls, or wide cups, rather than glasses. A Kir Breton, or Kir Normand, is a cocktail aperitif made with cider and cassis, rather than white wine and cassis for the traditional Kir. The Domfront, in the Orne, Basse Normandy, is famous for its pear cider, poiré. The Calvados du Domfront is made of cider and poiré. Some cider is also made in southwestern France, in the French part of the Basque Country. It is a traditional drink there and is making a recovery. Ciders produced here are generally of the style seen in the Spanish part of the Basque Country. A recently popular variety is the Akived. a piquant drink served cold. Calvados, from Normandy, and Lambic from Brittany are spirits made of cider through a process called double distillation. In the first pass, the result is a liquid containing 28% to 30% alcohol. In a second pass, the amount of alcohol is augmented to about 40%. Germany equals German cider, usually called Apfelwein, Apfelwein, and regionally known as Ebelwoi, Apfelmost, Applemust. Vies, from Latin vice, the second a substitute wine, or Sauermost, sour must, has an alcohol content of 5.5% to 7% and a tart, sour taste. German cider is mainly produced and consumed in Hessen, particularly in the Frankfurt, Wetterau, and Odenwald areas, in Moselle-Franken, Merzig, Saarland, and the Trier area, as well as the Lower Saar area and the region bordering on Luxembourg and in the area along the Neckar River in Swabia. In these regions, several large producers, as well as numerous small, private producers, often use traditional recipes. An official Wies route to cider route connects Saarburg with the border to Luxembourg. Ireland equals. Cider is a popular drink in Ireland. A single cider, Bulmers, dominates sales in Ireland. Owned by C&C and produced in Clonmel, County Tipperary, Bulmers has a connected history to the British Bulmers cider brand up until 1949. Outside the Republic of Ireland, C&C brand their cider as Magners. It is very popular in Ireland to drink cider over ice and encouraged in their advertising. Sedona, a non-alcoholic version of Bulmers, is a popular soft drink in Ireland and used to be a C&C-owned brand. However, in recent years, other ciders have begun to take a large share in the market. For example, Heineken's Orchard Thieves. There has been a renaissance in the smaller artisanal cider producers since 2010. These now number more than a dozen across the island of Ireland and offer the consumer a broad range of differing, typically non-mainstream flavor profiles. Italy equals. Cider was once widely produced in northern Italy's apple-growing regions, with a marked decline during fascist rule, due to the introduction of a law banning the industrial production of alcoholic beverages derived from fruits of less than 7% ABV, which was aimed at protecting wine producers. Present laws and regulations are favorable to cider makers, but production has only survived in a few alpine locations, mostly in the regions of Trentino and in Piedmont, where it is known as Van Ed Pom, apple wine, or pomada, because it traditionally was left to ferment in a vat along with grape pomace, giving it a distinctive reddish color. Netherlands equals. In the Netherlands, cider is not as commonly available as in its surrounding countries. In 2007, Heineken started testing a cider-based drink branded Jills in a number of bars throughout the country. The beverage, an alcopop made by blending sparkling water, fruit flavoring, malt, and cider, is marketed towards female drinkers as an alternative to beer. At the same time, Heineken also introduced Strongbow Gold as a secondary brand to provide the choice of a real cider, which was targeted to a male audience. Both beverages contain 5% alcohol by volume, which is similar to a typical draft beer in the Netherlands. Other brands are available in supermarkets, most noticeably Magners and Savannah Dry, and in liquor stores. Generally, a broader range may be obtained. Norway equals. In Norway, cider is a naturally fermented apple juice. Pear juice is sometimes mixed with the apple to get a better fermenting process started. 3 brands of sparkling cider with an ABV of approximately 10% are available to the Norwegian Public through distribution by the monopoly outlet Vinmonopolet. Hardanger cider-Sprudland from Hardanger. Krona cider from Bergen sourcing apples from Hardanger. And Lier cider from Lier. In line with the law of 1975 prohibiting all advertising of alcoholic beverages of ABV above 2.5%. The products receive little exposure despite a few favorable press reviews. Ciders of low alcohol levels are widely available. Mostly brands imported from Sweden. Carbonated soft drinks with no alcoholic content may also be marketed as cider. Portugal. Cider was once very popular in northern Portugal where its production was larger than wine production until the 11th century. But nowadays, its popularity has decreased and it is only consumed in the coasts of Minho, Ancora e Lima, where it is used as a refreshment for thirst. In some festivities, it is still used rather than wine. There's also a traditional production of the drink in Madeira. Poland. Poland is the largest producer of apples in Europe. Cider is known in Poland as SY-dər or Jablecznik. In 2013, Poles drank 2 million liters of cider, which adds up to 1% of the country's annual alcohol sales. Sales more than doubled from the previous year. In the summer of 2014, Minister of Economy Janusz Piekoszyński supported in vain the creation of a draft law to legalize television cider publicity. The category is just gaining popularity among consumers. Areas strong in cider production are focused around the center of the country in the Masovian and Łódź voivodeships. Large quantities of Polish apple concentrate are exported to UK, Scandinavia, and Ireland for cider production. Spain. The making and drinking of cider is traditional in several areas of northern Spain, mainly Galicia, the Principality of Asturias, Cantabria, and the Basque Country. The largest producer of cider in Spain is the Atlantic region of Asturias, where cider is considered not only a beverage but an intrinsic part of its culture and folklore. Asturias amounts more than 80% of the whole production of Spain. The consumption of cider in Asturias is of 54 liters per person per year, probably the highest in any European region. One of the most popular ciders in Spain is called El Gatillo, the bagpipe player, which can be found everywhere in Spain and which is produced in this region. However, it must not be confused with the traditional Asturian cider as it is a sparkling cider more in the way of French ciders. It is a factory-produced cider, sweet and very foamy, much like Lambrusco, different from the more artisan and traditional cider productions. Recently, new apple tree plantations have been started in grounds belonging to the old coal mines, once important in Asturias. The first testimony about cider in Asturias was made by Greek geographer Strabo in 60 BC. The traditional Asturian sidra is a still cider of 4 to 8% strength, although there are other varieties. Traditionally, it is served in cidrarias and chigras, pubs specializing in cider where it is also possible to have other drinks as well as traditional food. One of the most outstanding characteristics is that it is poured in very small quantities from a height into a wide glass, with the arm holding the bottle extended upwards and the one holding the glass extended downwards. This technique is called escanchiruncullen, also ekaruncullen, and is done to get air bubbles into the drink, espalma, thus giving it a sparkling taste like champagne that lasts a very short time. Cider is also poured from barrels in the traditional espicas. Cider has also been popular in the Basque Country for centuries, whilst Texacolí and Rioja wines became more popular in Biscay, Álava, and Navarre during the 19th century. There is still a strong Basque cider culture in Gipuzkoa. From the 1980s, government and gastronomic associations have worked to revive this culture in all Basque regions. Known as SY-dər, IPA, SY-dər, it is drunk either bottled or in a cider house, called a cider-producing, where it is poured from barrels. Most of cider-producers are in the north of Gipuzkoa, Asturias, Hernani, Urnieta, and Usable, but they can be found everywhere in Gipuzkoa, the northwest of Navarre and the northern Basque Country. Cider tasting events are popular in the Basque province of Gipuzkoa, where stalls are set up on the street selling the drink from several producers at cheap prices and served until stock runs out. Sweden Due to Swedish law, stores in Sweden cannot sell cider with less than 15% juice by volume under the name cider. Cider with none or less than 15% juice is instead usually sold as apple pear beverage of cider. Character. Swedish. Apple, Parendrick med cider character. Brands of cider in Sweden include Rekorderlig, Kvik, Herrljunga and Kopparberg. Switzerland In Switzerland, cider is called Sauermostersaft in the German-speaking part, cider in the Romandie, and Sidro in the Italian-speaking regions. The drink was made popular in the 19th century when apple production increased due to progress in pomology. At the turn of the century, cider consumption was at 28.1 litre per person. In the 1920s, advantages in the pasteurization of apple juice and the emerging temperance movement led to a strong decrease of cider production. Today, typical Swiss cider consists of fermented apple juice mixed with 30% fresh juice which is added for sweetness. This drink is then pasteurized and force carbonated. Imported cider is not common as according to Swiss laws cider must contain more than 70% of juice. United Kingdom There are two broad main traditions in cider production in the UK, the West Country tradition and the Eastern Kent and East Anglia tradition. The former are made using a much higher percentage of true cider apples and so are richer in tannins and sharper in flavour. Kent and East Anglia ciders tend to use a higher percentage of or are exclusively made from culinary and dessert fruit. They tend to be clearer, more vinous and lighter in body and flavour. At one end of the scale are the traditional, small farm-produced varieties. These are non-carbonated and usually cloudy orange in appearance. Britain's West Country contains many of these farms which have an abundance of ancient varieties of specialist cider apples. Production is often on such a small scale, the product being sold only at the site of manufacture or in local pubs and shops. At the other end of the scale are the factories mass-producing brands such as Strongbow and Blackthorn. Mass-produced cider, such as that produced by Bulmers, is likely to be pasteurized and force carbonated. The color is likely to be golden yellow with a clear appearance from the filtration. White ciders are almost colorless in appearance. South America. Argentina. In Argentina, cider, or sidra, is by far the most popular alcoholic carbonated drink during the Christmas and New Year holidays. It has traditionally been considered the choice of the middle and lower classes, along with banana fizz and pineapple juice, whereas the higher classes would rather go for champagne or local sparkling wines for their Christmas and New Year toast. Popular commercial brands of cider are Real, La Victoria, Rama Caída, 2 Nguyen. It is usually marketed in 0.72-litre glass or plastic bottles. However, there has been lately a campaign by some bottlers to make cider a drink consumed all year round, in any occasion, and not only seasonally. Cider now comes in smaller bottle sizes, and commercials show people drinking it any time, and not only toasting with it around a traditional Christmas and New Year table. Chile. Cider has been made in Chile since colonial times. Southern Chile accounts for nearly all cider production in the country. Chileans make a distinction between sidra, cider, in fact, sparkling cider, and chicha de manzana, apple chicha, a homemade cider that is considered of less quality. Uruguay. Cider fizz. A fizz is a cider variety made by mixing and fermenting various fruit juices other than apple with cider, as anana fizz, pineapple juice, frutia fizz, strawberry juice, or durazno fizz, peach juice. Asia. East Asia. Cider in Japan and Korea refers to a soft drink similar to Sprite or lemonade. A popular drink in China is called apple vinegar, which is apple juice. Shanxi province is noted for the vinegar produced there. India. A filtered non-alcoholic carbonated apple juice called Apifizz was introduced by Pal in India in 2005, and it became an instant hit. Recently, they have decided to push the brand beyond the Rs 1,000 crore mark. Pakistan. Non-alcoholic, apple-flavored carbonated drinks are popular in the country, with local brands such as Moran Bottlers Apple Cider and Murray Brewery's Big Apple in the market. Japan. In Japan, cider, refers to a soft drink similar to Sprite or lemonade. The terms cider, shidoru, or apple sparkling wine refer to the alcoholic beverage. Cider is also used as a marketing term to describe canned or bottled ciders containing a cider widget, or ciders which are cold filtered rather than pasteurized. The term cider bouché applies to higher quality cider sold in champagne-style bottles. Many ciders are sold in corked bottles, but some screw-top bottles exist. Popular brands include SY-dər cider and Kirin's Hard cider. SY-dər cider was awarded the International Cider Challenge Silver Medal in 2014. Kirin's Hard cider is available as draft cider in bars and izakaya throughout the country. Africa. South Africa. There are two main brands of cider produced in South Africa: Hunters and Savannah Dry. They are produced and distributed through Distel Group Limited. Hunters Gold was first introduced in South Africa in 1988 as an alternative to beer. The Hunters range includes Hunters Dry, Hunters Gold, Hunters Export and Hunters Edge, launched in April 2017. Savannah Dry was introduced in 1996 and also comes in a light premium variety as well as in a Savannah Dark variant. Kenya. East African breweries launched Tusker Premium Cider in 2017. Southwest Pacific. Australia. The composition of cider is defined in the Australia-New Zealand Food Standards Code and means the fruit wine prepared from the juice or must of apples and no more than 25% of the juice or must of pears. Cider has been made in Australia since its early settlement. Primarily this production has been for limited local usage, with national commercial distribution and sales dominated by two brands, Mercury Cider and Strongbow. Since early 2005, they have been joined in the market by numerous new producers including Three Oaks Cider, Pipsqueak, and Tooheys 5 Seed Cider, as well as imported brands like Magners, Westerns, Monteiths, Copperbourg, Recordilig, and Summersby. With the growth in interest in cider, the number of local producers has increased. Some cider producers are attempting to use more traditional methods and traditional cider apple varieties. Other smaller brands rely on the available culinary standard eating, supermarket and cooking apples. Fruit. From Victoria's Yarra Valley come Coldstream Cider, Kelly Bros Cider and Napoleon & Co. The Bridge Road Brewery and Amulet Winery, both in Victoria's Beechworth, have released ciders. South Australia's boutique ciders include Lobo, Adelaide Hills, The Hills Cider, Adelaide Hills, Thorougoods, Burra, and Aussie Cider, Barossa. In Western Australia, the number of cider producers has also grown in the southwest region, particularly in areas where wine is also produced, with producers in Denmark, Pemberton, and Margaret River. In Tasmania, there are a number of boutique cider makers including Red Sails, Middleton, Pagan Cider, Huon Valley, Dickens Cider, Tamar Valley, and Sprayton Cider, Sprayton, New Zealand. In New Zealand, there are many companies which produce and distribute real cider or cider. Able Cider of Nelson is one of the few producers to make vintage cider from 100% freshly harvested apples and pears. Unlike the bulk producers, Able hand-harvest tree-ripened fruit, crush it, then ferment until dry. Able is unfined and unfiltered, meaning they allow the cider to naturally clarify via gravity. This gentle process helps preserve the natural fruit characteristics. Other boutique cider houses, including McAshan's Brewery in Stoke on the South Island, also specialize in dry-style ciders from freshly crushed fruit. All mass-produced ciders in New Zealand are loosely regulated with a minimum content of fruit juice and alcohol content, mostly 4 to 5%. Lion produces Isaac's ciders from concentrate under the Max trademark. The range includes 3 artificial flavors: apple, pear, and berry, with limited edition ciders that are released seasonally. Their Spates brand also makes a cider from concentrate. The Dominion Breweries brands Monteith's Brewery in Greymouth on the west coast of the South Island makes an apple and a pear cider, while their Old Moot Cider, based in Nelson on the South Island, is blending fruit wines with cider to create fruit ciders including boysenberry and feijoa varieties. Recorderlig cider, pear, wild berries, mango and raspberry, strawberry and lime, apple and blackcurrant, and apple and spice, and Johnny Arrow Cider are another 2 brands owned by this company. North America. In the U.S., cider refers to unfiltered apple juice, traditionally made with a distinct sweet tart taste, and in these regions, the fermented beverage is known as hard cider. In Canada, the terms cider and apple cider are interchangeable, although they generally refer to alcoholic and juice beverages, respectively. Canada. Cider is produced commercially in every Canadian province except Manitoba, Newfoundland and Labrador, and Saskatchewan, usually with a 5 to 7% alcohol content, although the term is also used for some non-fermented apple juices. According to the Canadian Food and Drug Regulations, alcoholic cider is an alcoholic fermentation of apple juice that does not contain more than 13% absolute alcohol by volume, ABV, or less than 2.5% ABV. Quebec cider is considered a traditional alcoholic beverage. It is generally sold in 750 ml bottles, has an alcohol content generally between 7% and 13%, with aperitif ciders having alcohol content up to 20%, and can be served as a substitute for wine. As in the rest of the world, sparkling cider is getting more and more popular in Quebec, and thanks to the law, cider sold in the province can only be made from 100% pure apple juice. Cider making was, however, forbidden from the early years of British rule, as it was in direct conflict with established British brewers' interests, most notably John Molson. In recent years, a new type called ice cider has been sold. This type of cider is made from apples with a particularly high level of sugar caused by natural frost. Mexico. Two types of cider, sidra, are sold in Mexico. One type is a popular apple-flavored, carbonated soft drink, sold under a number of soft drink brands, such as Sidral Monday and Manzana Lift, both Coca-Cola FEMSA brands, and Sidral Lager from Group Ager. The other type, alcoholic sidra, is a sparkling cider typically sold in champagne-style bottles with an alcohol content comparable to beer. Sidra was, due to the expense of imported champagne, sometimes used as a substitute for New Year's Eve toasts in Mexico, as it is also a sweet, fruity drink. However, now the practice is to drink cider on Christmas Eve, celebrated with a family, and champagne on New Year's, celebrated with friends. Cider beverages form a very small share of the Mexican alcoholic beverage market, with the figures for 2009 volume sales amounting to only 3.8 million liters. United States. In the United States, the definition of cider is usually broader than in Europe and specifically Ireland and the UK. There are two types, one being traditional alcoholic hard cider and the other sweeter soft cider, often simply called apple cider. See also Fassbrause, hard soda, list of cider brands, list of beverages. Further reading: Farmhouse Cider and Scrumpy, Bob Bunker, 1999. Household Cyclopedia, 1881. The History and Virtues of Cider. R. K. French. Robert Hale, 1982. Reprinted 2010. Ciderit Encyclopedia Britannica. Cider. The New Student's Reference Work. 1914. Cider at Curly. Based on DMOZ.